if you can get your foundations right naturally and help support each of these body systems and recognize it for your individual horse, you're going to get them to achieve their ability and thrive in that environment.
You don't want to have that flare up in 3 or 4 years' time become something very chronic that's possibly irreversible, and then be spending thousands, if not.
Welcome everyone to episode 115 of the Send Nutrition Podcast. You're with your host Bryan and Peter today, and today's topic is what is a balanced diet and how it can save you money. How are you, Peter?
Bryan, extremely well. It's another Friday. I think, this one might be here for 3 days. This one, where do we start?
Yeah, I think we could open up a can of worms here, but what our ultimate goal is to explain why balanced diets are important and how it can give you an extra few dollars in your pocket, because then you're not wasting money on additional supplementations.
As we said in our previous podcast, there's so much information out there in the industry, and it's not funny. What we're trying to address today is that balancing your diet is most likely the most important thing and the most cost-effective thing you can do for your horse, because if you get the balance wrong over time, you're most likely going to create some sort of deficiencies where you might not see it today or tomorrow or next month or next year. But if you're planning to keep that horse for X amount of years, where a lot of horse owners do, you don't want to have that flare up in 3 or 4 years' time become something very chronic that's possibly irreversible, and then be spending thousands, if not tens of thousands, in vet bills to try to rectify a problem that might not be able to get rectified.
Yeah, 100%, Peter. And where we start with all this is the National Research Council has those minimum nutrient levels for a horse just to survive, and that can be varied between what workload they're in, what type of horse they are, whether it's for breeding or really high performance. But what these levels are set out, and their ballpark figures, is what we're trying to achieve in our foundations every day, but also remembering for their metabolism, their energy production intake, and how the horse is growing. If they're a young horse, there's a lot of things to consider. And firstly, these balanced diets have to be very individualized, and it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah, 100%. And as our listeners know what Bryan just mentioned, when we created our diet, which is at Send, what we sell is a balanced diet. We don't just sell individual products. We worked off the NRC with different nutritionists that we worked with to make sure that we're at least following some sort of foundation, some sort of guidelines, that we're not plucking numbers out of the sky and then saying, well, this is the best thing since sliced bread. So there is a base that we started with, and we try to adhere to, if not exceed, on a lot of our products. In terms of the zinc, we've got about 700 milligrams of zinc per kilo in our grain-free. This is why we can have such a low feed rate, because we don't skimp on the vitamins and minerals, where some of the other companies, they'll put a very low amount where you have to feed the 5 or 6 kilos to hit that 700 milligrams. I mean, that's just one example.
Yeah, well said, Peter. What we're trying to achieve is to balance what we have in the foundations in the Australian soil conditions with the forage available. And our forage or pasture that we feed our horse must be balanced, because it has its deficiencies, it has its shortfalls. And when you take into account the breed, workload, the age, and the health status of your horse, you need to try and get these levels in their optimal number for them to thrive in their chosen discipline.
Bryan, too many people, and we get this almost every day, are wasting so much money, looking for supplements to miraculously fix a problem they would never have if the diet was correct in the first place.
100%. We see this at least once a week in the office when we do have a confused horse owner. The horse is not looking their best, and we start writing. And this writing nearly goes off the page with what they're adding to try and balance, and then what we see is what they're trying to counteract, and they just don't know where they stand with how balanced it is, because there's so much noise and smoke and mirrors in the industry.
Bryan, the golden child of the supplements are the hoof supplements, as an example, and the best of them are trying to fix a common hole in equine diets.
Yeah,
it's that simple.
But the other thing about the hoof supplement is that it won't happen overnight. The hoof growth happens over many months, just under a year for the whole hoof to grow out. So they're looking for that magic wand to fix it straight away. But if you supplement those additional hoof supplements every month, you're not going to have money to feed yourself in the end.
Bryan, I want a magic wand that I can just swipe and it'll give me like 6 bottles of gin at my table now. Can you find me one?
But no, I don't think I can help you out there, Pete. But I think when it comes to when you break down the ingredient list of those horse supplements, yes, we're trying to provide higher trace minerals, higher biotin as well. But when you look at a complete feed or a quality complete feed that is fed consistently week in, week out, you're going to try and match that, or if not better, than just grabbing that additional supplement on top.
Bryan, I'm sure there's some listeners out there going, all right, wise guys, you're talking about a balanced diet. I want to know, what is a balanced diet and where do we start with a balanced diet?
So a truly balanced diet is one that matches the environment or that requirement of 1 to 1.5% of roughage per day at a minimum for your horse. So the profile of your hay and pasture is going to be the most amount of nutrients going into the horse. And this can be unbalanced because of the iron levels in the Australian soils. All the pastures and all the hays are higher in iron, low in zinc, lower in copper and other trace minerals. Plus, they are higher in potassium, low in sodium, lower in chloride. So we've got to recognise that the hays and pastures that we have in Australia have their shortfalls, and we balance these up with products that bring these levels up to sufficient amounts, but not overloading the horse so that it affects their forage intake, which is the most important part to lower the risk of ulcers and metabolically through their digestive tract health. And when you look at your pasture or your hay, if you want to be serious about feeding a balanced diet, that needs to be analysed to see where you stand, protein levels especially as well, but also your sugar and starch, because you don't want to be doubling up with this and overloading the horse's system.
Spot on, Bryan. You mentioned word analyse. So a couple of weeks ago, Bryan, I went to Victoria, met some customers and hopefully some potential new customers. And there was a farm we went out there to, without naming any names. There was close to 250 horses on the property. And we went out there, talked obviously to the management, went through, had the tour. Look, they were feeding 4 kilograms, 5 kilograms of a commercial feed, but their pasture was knee high, and it was greener than Kermit the Frog. So
I think the Queensland farms would kill for the pasture.
It was
beautiful.
Like, it made us want to eat it out of the ground. It's how nice it was. So what Bryan was saying is the foundation is pasture or hay. What we did is we took samples from 4 or 5 different paddocks. We've sent them out to a lab to get analysed. And look, they're going to give us the protein, the fat, they're going to give us the iron, they're going to give us the calcium phosphorus ratio, everything like that. So based on those results, we're going to tailor make a custom diet for that particular property, where most likely or not, they're going to get away with feeding a couple of kilograms, possibly just off the grain free, depending on the pasture result. The advantage for them is they can feed once a day, where with the current regime, they're feeding twice a day. So that's extra money they have to pay staff, and over 250 horses, that's a lot of wage bills that are going to be saved. It's also going to be a lower feed rate, so they don't have to have as much feed stored in the property, better for their cash flow. And all we're doing is we're trying to balance the deficiencies in that pasture, whatever they may be, with a vitamin mineral product, and then possibly the oil if there is any omega-3 deficiency as well. It's that simple.
And what they'll actually find is that the horse is not wasting energy trying to get through that high volume of hard feed and not grazing, which is what their natural instinct is.
Yeah, Bryan, just further onto that. So in that particular case, the horse were getting between 4 and 5 kilograms of a commercial hard feed. What was happening is that feed was actually bloating their stomachs and stopping them from consuming more pasture, which in hindsight is actually costing the owners a lot of money, because the pasture in the ground to a horse is a lot cheaper, but it's also a lot healthier. So what we want to do is we want to turn around that balance where they're not getting 4 or 5 kilograms of a hard feed and whatever pasture they'll eat once they digest that hard feed. We want their foundation to be the pasture, and then we want to give as little of a hard feed as possible to correct any deficiencies in that pasture they have.
Yeah, that's very well said, Peter. And when you get this pasture or your hay testing results back, it's not an exact science to balance it up. So what we're trying to say is it's more like bucket science, or getting to a better ballpark figure, because there's so many factors with horses. Their genetic potential in how they absorb these vitamins and minerals, their workload, the way they cope with stress, that can alter nutrient absorption, and many other things. But what we're trying to do is supply the horse with high quality vitamin minerals because they're used in all body systems of the horse, including the immune system, hoof health, skin and coat, and also having a better profile that's lower in sugar, lower in starch, and no unnecessary ingredients is better for their behavior, because if you can get that gut health right, there's that gut-brain connection, and this is really important, especially for younger horses as they're learning their job or learning their discipline, to really take that next step.
Yeah, extremely well summarised, Bryan. Just one final sort of aspect of that farm that will go into our next section. If some of our customers have got a hay only diet, which is a lot different to a pasture diet, we actually worked out that there's 3 or 4 months of the year there where the grass absolutely just goes barren and goes to zero. So what Bryan and I recommended was any excess pasture they've got, instead of slashing it and let it waste away, actually bale the excess pasture you've got, store it for those 3 or 4 winter months, when it does come. So A, you're not changing the hay of the horse. B, it's costing you nothing apart from the slashing and the storage, and not changing the hay throughout. Like, you might get a bad batch of some sort of hay that's moldy in a wintertime and you're backwards straight away, where if you've baled your own pasture, you know what the consistency is. We don't have to change the sen diet really drastically to try to base it around a totally different hay, which might be high in sugar or high in protein. So it's less work for us and it's less work for the farm, but it's more cost effective for the farm as well. So segueing on into Bryan, if some of our customers say it's winter time, they've got no pasture, it's bare bone paddocks, what do I need to look out for if they are going to be on a hay-only diet to balance that diet?
So the shortfalls of hay is especially seen in that trace mineral profile, and as we touched on before, the zinc and copper especially. But also one of the big differences between hay and pasture is that omega profile. So the high omega-3 in the pasture, when it's dried, it loses this. And the omega-3 is essential for all parts of the horse's body, and the horses evolved on that plant-based omega-3. What we've seen in our time in the industry, nearly 10 years, Sen has been instrumental at educating people to feed a better oil, a more pure oil, and that's comes through the Sen oil with the high omega-3. But when you add that to a hay-reliant diet, you're getting it closer to what we're simulating in nature. So for those drought-affected pastures or farms, that when you look at going on that Sen feed program where you have our hard feeds that are low sugar, low starch, high fiber, and also with the Sen oil, you're bringing up the nutrient deficiencies to what is required for the horse in a more pure way.
Yeah, 100% agree, Bryan. Echo those thoughts. The big thing from my end is when you do switch from your pasture to your hay, vitamin E is very important as well, because obviously the hay has lost that. Bryan mentioned the omega-3, but vitamin C too is abundant in pasture. Horses can produce their own vitamin C, obviously, if they're getting the right nutrients, but sometimes what they produce is not enough for the stress levels that they have. So supplementation of that, should be, what we would recommend. And also vitamin A too, which is a precursor carotene that are lost as well.
Yeah, 100% agreed, Peter. So a balanced diet, it includes the essential nutrients in the right ratios, and there's all different rates of absorption, but what the Sen diet does is it brings these ratios into a better state, that the deficiencies are seen in the forage. And a balanced diet enables the horse to perform at their ability, or their ability to thrive in that chosen discipline. It can really lower the risk of issues in the digestive system, and also because 70% of the immune system is found in that hindgut environment, it can really help make a robust immune system, particularly in performance. So when a horse is sick, that's a lot of downtime. So if you can really support the body and all the pathways with a balanced diet, you're going to have a better horse, and you're going to have a better experience of horse ownership.
Yeah, I think one key advantage that separates Sen apart from some of our competitors, that all of our feeds are very low sugar and starch. I think the maximum we're about 5%. So people might be asking, what's the advantage for me? So if you've got a property that you might have really rich rye hay, or you might have a barley grass, or even like a rye pasture up to 20% sugar, when you're going to be feeding 4 or 5 kilograms of a grain-based product on top of the 20% sugar, you're asking for trouble. Long term, there will be something that's going to give. The advantage with our feed is being at 5% sugar. You can give 2, 3, 4, 5 kilos. It's still absolutely safe. Not that you will be giving that, that amount, but what I'm saying is that having a high fiber, low sugar, low starch feed, our products are suitable whether you've got a Rhodes grass, which is 5% sugar, or you've got, a barley grass or barley hay, which might be 25, 30% sugar. You don't have that flexibility with any other feed that is grain based. And you might go, oh yeah, but I'm not feeding much of the hard feed. I'm feeding 1 or 2 kilograms. Well, you got to look at the vitamin and mineral levels in those feeds. So if you're feeding 2 kilograms, where you really should be feeding 5 or 6 kilograms to hit the vitamin mineral requirements per day, then you're going to create a shortfall of vitamins and minerals while you're trying to keep the sugar at bay.
That's well said, Peter. And I'll even add on to another aspect of why our hard feeds, the high fiber, low sugar, low starch pellets, are different to any others on the market is we don't put an unnecessary oil or fat through that pellet. So you'll find that other companies, they'll try and dilute their sugar and starch content because they're using a vast array of ingredients. We have a fixed ingredient list, but they'll add a cooking oil to their pellet, or I think some look like dog kibble, and I just can't understand why they look a bit dead inside the actual pellet. And what they're doing is when you form a pellet, you're actually heating it, and heating an oil is just really oxidizing the fat in it. So at Sen, we choose not to put our oil in our pellet. We've got the raw product and the high fiber profile, and we add the oil separately. So that's another thing that we pride ourselves on, being a more pure ingredient company, which actually helps the horse's antioxidant profile. So when it comes to vitamin E, vitamin C, those antioxidants in the body, they're meant to be used for recovery and to really help the horse's overall systems. But if you're giving them an oxidized oil in the pellet, then actually you have to use those antioxidants to help mitigate what they're intaking with the free radical production. So you're actually shortcutting the horse's antioxidant potential. I just tried to put that in a more layman terms way, but yeah, just no unnecessary ingredients in our pellets. And I think with the thousands of horse owners that feed Sen, I think they'll agree that they're getting the results that they want.
I think a lot of people are not aware that the cooking oils that are obviously, inside a pellet, it, gets heated sometimes over 100 degrees. It, as you mentioned, it oxidizes. It causes more problems than what it is good. So some people look at the bag and go, oh, great, it's got an oil in there. I don't have to feed an oil. But you got to look at it logically. Well, it's like deep frying, your chips, and then you don't go drinking that oil after you deep fry your chips, or you don't sprinkle that oil onto your salad, onto your Caesar salad, yeah?
Yeah, correct. And even some companies put an oil on the outside after it's been formed. But look, when you look at how omega-3 breaks down, we want to simulate what's in fresh pasture, which is high omega-3, low omega-6. And all those oils are high in omega-6 to be stable enough. And if not stored correctly, they're going to be slightly rancid or oxidized. And it's just something we don't preach. We want the best, most efficient digestion and antioxidant support for a horse in performance, and the way you feed day in, day out is going to reflect on the outside of the horse.
Yeah, Bryan, you mentioned at performance. Some of our listeners might be listening, all right, well, I'm in a performance industry, I compete at a very high level. All I'm hearing is just, high fiber, low sugar, I need the glycogen stores. So a balanced diet needs to be custom made, as Bryan mentioned, for your particular discipline. In terms of high performance horses, look, we know they need carbohydrates. We know they've got to replenish those glycogen stores. Bryan, I recommend oats as the best carbohydrate source, because we find that it's easier to balance the Sen diet around oats themselves. Ideally crushed oats if you can get them. But that's where we come in and actually, work on the protein, work on the fiber, work on the carbohydrates, try to work out what sort of work you're doing, and then balance the diet around the work.
Yeah, 100%. The trainers that we do consult, they've got that flexibility. You've got the forage, you've got the Sen foundation, the hard feed, the high fiber, low sugar, low starch, and then they adapt their oats level to the horse's response and what they require in whichever discipline they're doing. Whether they add a kg here or half a kg, they know where they stand with their sugar and starch load in the diet. It's not hidden within another hard feed. They're not feeding grain over grain. and then they can see how the horse reacts and just adjust it to those levels. So we find that the starch in oats is better digested than corn or the traditional barley. So we've had great success with this even at the top level in endurance racing and eventing. And what we want to do is just try and individualize the diets for each horse, and then it really does come down to your training and management of the horse to get the best out of them to reach their ability.
Oats has got a really bad stigma in industry, and I think we've done a podcast to address this. And I think where the industry's gone wrong, or where the stigma sort of started, was someone might have been feeding, corn and barley and 5 kilograms of a grain or grain byproduct feed, and they've added a kilo of oats, and the horse has, gone lame, or it's had feed issues. But you got to look at how much sugar and starch and carbohydrates and glycogen is in the whole feed, rather than just saying, oh, well, this one went in last, this is the blame that it's going to get. So as an example, say for our performance trainers, our feed, including the oats, might be 6 kilograms, and let's just say 2 kilograms of that is going to be oats. So it's around about a 33% carbohydrate level. We've got trainers just feeding one meal a day in that 6 kilogram feed, and it's absolutely safe because the fiber in the pellets dilutes, the sugar in the oats. So it's absolutely safe. Where if you try to feed 6 kilograms of a grain-based product, like, you're going to blow the horse up, because they can only really tolerate 2.2 kilograms of grain in any one sitting.
Yeah, there certainly is a stigma in a lot of disciplines. Like, I think, Pete, when we visit some stables, they're separating with the fillies and the mares. They're getting an oat-free diet because they're prone to tying up, and then the geldings are getting a different diet that has oats in it. It's a real big stigma where it's actually the carbohydrate profile that they should be looking at. And I just hope within the next 5 years it actually gets straightened out, because I think oats does get a bad rap, and I think it does come down to the history that they've had with the tying up, and whether it was nutrition related or not. I think oats has just been caught in the middle of it in history.
It's very funny, like when we have the initial sort of conversation, whether it's face to face or sort of over the phone, and when we do mention that along with our feed, we recommend oats, there's like the most awkward silence, or if we're face to face, they go blue in the face, like they're about to pass out. And they're like, are you sure? I said, yeah, we're sure. And like we just explained, sort of a couple of minutes ago, we go, well, as long as it's balanced, you need the fiber, you need everything. And as Bryan mentioned, not sure exactly where the stigma came from, but we'd love it just to, someone to tell us why oats mixed with the right amount of fiber, right amount of fat is dangerous.
Yeah, well, it's not going to cause the tying up, that's for sure. In the research, there's no conclusive evidence that oats causes the tying up. It's probably what Peter had explained before. It's the grain over grain over grain that has caused the tying up. But it's also the management of fitness within the horse and whether the muscles are ready for that type of workload, because you can put the horse into a tying up episode for an unfit horse at a higher workload.
I think one thing we can say with our feed, obviously, with having a very low carbohydrate level compared to some of the other feeds, is that if one of our customers' horses does tie up, they know that it's not nutritionally related, and they can try to find a root cause with something else, knowing that nutritional box has been ticked.
And then you got the other aspects of electrolyte imbalance. So it's not even related to the feed; it's actually related to other supplements that is required, like salt and electrolytes in that performance.
Bryan, there'll be some listeners out there going, all right, great, so you're advocating a balanced diet, and then they might be saying, well, why do you have supplements?
I wouldn't call salt a supplement, but the reason why you put supplements on top of the balanced diet is individualized to that certain horse's requirements. So you've got older horses that have more worn joints. You've got older horses that can't make enough vitamin C because of their stress. As a horse ages, they make less vitamin C to cope, and you need that antioxidant support and also immune system support. So when you look at all your supplements, don't look at them until you have your foundations right first. But then supplements can be used in every discipline to get the best out of your horse, to make them more comfortable and to achieve their ability.
I think most people that have called, sort of myself or Bryan or even Jazz and Magellan, and they've asked us, look, I've seen one of your supplements, I want to feed it. Can you tell me more about it? They get a bit shocked when we say, well, what's your current diet? Correct. Rather than, oh, well, this is what it does. It's gonna heal everything that your horse has got.
Yeah, we don't want you to feed the supplements first. We want to see if you don't need to feed the supplement, because I think we do it every week, that we're trying to simplify the diet so it doesn't run off the page and be all complicated. We want to really, when someone does come to us with their diets, it is a lot of supplements on a non-balanced foundation. That's what we find.
Well, that's why I think, as we mentioned earlier on, that everyone's looking out for the magic supplement, whether it's that hoof supplement, but you got to look at what's causing that problem rather than just trying to treat the symptom. And by getting to that main question, which is the topic for this podcast, what is a balanced diet? As Bryan mentioned, if your diet is balanced, you should not need to feed any supplements, barring you've got a performance horse. Argument's sake, we recommend our extra balance, because these horses are trained 7 days a week. They're going in extreme stresses, like a lot of travel. That gut basically needs the extra help that is just not enough in the nutrition. But that's like, professional sportsmen taking supplements as well.
So that nearly redefines a balanced diet for a performance horse, Peter, because we know a horse in performance has a stressed hindgut, which is affected. So to balance this, you would feed a digestive support supplement like the Extra Balance that has the live probiotics and other digestive support nutrients. So a balanced diet for a horse in heavy work may require, for that individual horse, a digestive supplement.
I think what we're trying to say is that we've created the supplements to stop problems happening on top of our balanced diet, rather than created supplements to treat other people's problems that their unbalanced diet has created.
Yeah, I followed you.
I hope our listeners did. So, as Bryan said, if it's a performance horse, we recommend the Sen Gold for obviously for joints, for everything like that. If a horse is getting trained every day, the Gold we recommend as part of the foundation for the morning feed, and then obviously the Extra Balance might be for the evening feed, because that horse needs its legs to be squeaky clean, and also needs its gut to be really very healthy.
Yeah, and there's a time crunch or timing to all this. You can't have a horse in training. It costs a lot of money in certain disciplines, and you need to try and achieve this without going down the medication route. You use that in acute conditions that are required, but if you can get your foundations right naturally and help support each of these body systems and recognize it for your individual horse, you're going to get them to achieve their ability and thrive in that environment.
As an example, if some of our listeners have got, have a healthy elderly horse that's a paddock ornament that's just living its best life, there might be no need for that horse to get anything but half a kilo of the grain free and the pasture that it's got. We're not going to recommend 8 different supplements just to try to clip the ticket of a horse that doesn't need it.
Yeah, correct. And there might be older horses that are on, say, some medications, and Guy McLean's horse Nugget is probably a very good example of this. He wanted to go down the more natural route to help the arthritis and inflammation in Nugget due to all his performances at a young age. And he's had remarkable results on the Sen Oil, the Sen Gold, and that high fiber, low sugar, low starch profile. And that's just one example. When you look at other people's horses, look at your own horse with a fresh set of eyes. Don't just base it off that other one's experience. It's a little bit of trial and error to which supplement you require, if any. But what we're trying to say is a balanced diet with a good foundation, you may not need that supplement.
Yeah, I think our listeners can sort of sense that we're very passionate about this topic, because it's, as I said, it's not just about trying to make money of some people's, misjudgment, sort of misguidance and thinking that grain is healthy for horses. 9 times out of 10, we can balance the diet and the horse health returns if we can get it sort of quick enough.
Yeah, we want you guys to actually have some money left over to maybe buy more horses, or even have a better glass of wine at the end of the day.
Or Bryan, maybe yourself, like colour and milk.
What?
So Bryan, maybe in your high school days, a colour and milk?
That's many moons ago, Pete. A Kahlua and milk, and I don't think you catch me dead with one of them now. Maybe a espresso martini, or a nice gin and tonic. But we want you guys to really get a good foundation, even time thinking about your nutrition. If you can tick that box and you have more time to think about the management and training of your horse and spend better time with them, and what we have at Sen is the solution, because we've done all that legwork for you, plus provide superior products that are more pure and better for the horse.
I think, as you mentioned, some of the listeners out there, if you're feeding multiple supplements to treat a symptom, chances are your diet is unbalanced. If you're feeding multiple supplements and your horse is performing and it's healthy and everything like that, you're probably feeding the supplements for the right reason. So as a rule of thumb, take that as as our sort of parting words. It's very easy to balance a diet. There's different websites that offer a service as well. You can put in your pastures, what feeds you feed, and everything like that, and it'll give you a green line or a red line. So there's multiple avenues to get that right. There's a few independent nutritionists that are true independent without them selling their own products to you. So, try to find one if you can. You're probably best going abroad, maybe to America, where they're really independent, not trying to flog you something at the same time.
Yeah, and if you trust what we say, just call our office. And what we do offer is a free nutrition consult. I think it's probably nearly booked out for the next 2 months, but Magellan's really instrumental in this. If you have a quick question, by all means, just call the office and one of us will try and answer it.
Yeah, we've seen some diets from these independent nutritionists in Australia that have got like 84 different products, because it's very hard to balance a diet with the fiber, fat, and protein with one company's feeds. And as I said earlier in a podcast, we sell a balanced diet. We don't sell individual products. What that diet consists of is our individual products. But looking at these other companies, or even these nutritionists that try to balance diets with other companies' products, they're not designed to be fed together. This is why it's very difficult to balance a diet with 4 or 5 different companies, because each company's, they've got a different mindset. One wants, higher protein. One wants, lower fiber. The other one wants higher carbohydrates. One's really low in zinc. The other one's very high in copper. So it's balancing that. It's like the kernels, herbs, and spices.
Yeah, and it's not an exact science. You're not going to get it to the exact decimal point, like 0.1 of a gram. You need to look at the horse's response. You need to get your hay and pasture tested if you're suspicious of a full imbalance at the moment. But if you don't go down that way, Sen has a profile that really matches the Australian conditions, and then we work on the response from there with your horse and the symptoms, if not clearing up those symptoms of any conditions.
Bryan, I think that's pretty much it for today. Anything else you'd like to leave our listeners with? Any wise parting words of yours?
No, I think the only thing we remind everyone is, if you do really like this podcast, share it with your friends. We've had a really good response. People get really motivated to feed right. They get excited about nutrition as well, as we hear from some of the phone calls. If you do like it, Spotify, Apple, they've got the star rating system. You can even leave feedback on it. We have a Sen users group on Facebook, which is over 4,000 members. Feel free to join that as well and join the conversation. And I think overall, we can't thank everyone enough for their support. And do you have anything, Peter?
No, Bryan, I think you've covered everything perfect.
Yep, all good. Well, we'll head off to lunch, and I think it's a Christmas party season coming up too.
Yeah, so we'll see everyone again in a couple of weeks' time.
Okay, cheers.